You get what? This?
Yeah, because I have just
Okay. Oh, we have enough copies of this. Okay.
Should I give everyone?
Yeah. Whoever didn't get it, some girl got it last week.
Okay.
Who doesn't have this?
How much class? I got me one. I owe you
Oh.
13
Okay, no
probably.
problem.
And so I got, thank you.
Okay.
I don't know what that is.
You say I want one. It could be anything.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, no, you could have gotten it last week. I don't know if you were here.
First one.
That would make me like 5.
Do you have?
I'll share with her. I'll share with her and then I'll let her do my stuff. I need to organize the stuff.
What are we doing for your? Yeah.
Thank you.
What's the use?
I understand.
I'll share with you.
Do you know the yeah,
Dragon light.
You know the job.
They have a shorter.
You did a good job the first time.
Yeah, I think a secretary. Okay, let's do it. I have a little bit hard with the new names, but let's do it.
Okay, we'll start. So again, for those of you that weren't here before, let me just give a short introduction to this class. So we've been learning Pirkei Avos from the beginning of the year. Pirkei Avos, the literal translation of the word is chapters of our fathers. And what it is, it's part of the Talmud. It's Mishnayos. It means it's the Mishnah. We know the Talmud is made up of two parts, the Mishnah and then the Gemara, which explains the Mishnah. This is only Mishnah. And we know that every tractate of the Talmud covers a different subject, which means there's a tractate called Shabbos, and that talks mainly about all the laws of Shabbat. There's a tractate called Rosh Hashanah, and of course that talks about the laws that pertain to Rosh Hashanah. There's a tractate called Psachim that talks all about the laws of first Pesach and the second Pesach. And the same is with other tractates. So every tractate has a sort of subject that is the main subject of the tractate. So this tractate, which is called Avos, has, I would say, 3 things which are really covered in it. It's very small, but it covers 3 major things. One is it talks about character traits. In various places all over the Talmud, you'll find a quote here, a quote there, but the one place that has sort of the Torah's perspective on character traits, what's a positive character trait, what's a negative, and where do we know this from, or what should you do about it, all this, the one place in the tractate of the Talmud that focuses on it is Pirkei Avos. And the second, and one of the reasons why we study this, one of the reasons why it's in the Siddur, everyone has this in their Siddur. The copies I gave you is also from the Siddur, is because the custom is that when it comes to the end of Pesach, once Passover is over, we have 6 weeks left till Shavuot, the next holiday. Shavuot is a holiday that we celebrate the receiving of the Torah. In order to be able to receive Torah, we have to have more refined character. We refine our character traits. So therefore, during those 6 weeks, every Shabbat, after the afternoon services, we learn one chapter of this tractate, Pirkei Avos. The other 2 things it talks about One of them is about the oral tradition, how the oral tradition was transmitted from generation to generation, and who were the authorities in each generation, that they were the ones who were sort of the teachers of Torah of that generation. Just like Moshe was in his generation, and Yeshua was in his generation, Joshua. In every generation, there were those that were considered the main teachers of Torah, and the Torah was transmitted through them. And that's the second point. The third point is, it's also as preparation for Shavuos, Matan Torah, is where it talks about not the laws, but it talks about how and why Torah is so precious, so important, and what it means to us. And all these things are preparation for Shavuos. In this class, though, we're not going to learn every Mishnah. We're going to be skipping. And the reason is because in this class, we're focusing mainly on those Mishnahs that talk about character traits. That's the point of this class. What does the Torah have to say about character traits? What's positive? What's negative? And we'll be going in this booklet. We have different statements and quotes from different sources that talk about various character traits, and we'll talk about it on a more sort of practical level. So what we started last week, let's go back to the beginning. So in this booklet, the first few pages is Pirkei Avos, that's the actual chapter with the English translation. And after that, we take certain subjects that are related to each Mishnah, and we elaborate on it and bring different sources or different quotes that relate to that subject. So because there are so many students that are new, I'm going to go back to Mishnah 4. Yes, I do. It's not extra. It's yours. Okay. Anybody else didn't get? Okay. So we're going to do Mishnah 4 again. So you'll see in the Mishnah, there is going to be a mixture. Some of the words, and even in one single Mishnah, could be about character traits. Something there could be about how precious the Torah is. There's something there usually about who is the rabbi that was the recipient of Torah from the previous generation. So this is how it begins. We'll read from the English. He used to say, who is he? If we look back, we see it was Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel, he was considered the greatest leader of Torah, the greatest authority of Torah in his generation. And he was the one who was the recipient from the greatest leader of the previous generation, which was his father, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. So he used to say these words: fulfill his will as if it were your own, so meaning Hashem, so that Hashem may fulfill your will as if it were his own. That's in the positive, to do positive things. And then to refrain from doing something negative, the same point, nullify your will before his will, so that he may nullify the will of others before your will, to accommodate you. So this is based on the principle of Midah Keneged Midah, which is a principle in Torah that Hashem relates to a person in a way which is described as measure for measure. The way we deal with others, that's the way Hashem deals with us. The way I deal with Hashem, that's how Hashem deals with me. So therefore, if I put aside my will for Hashem, then Hashem will do something similar. It'll be sort of a reflection of what I did. He'll put aside other people's will for my will. And if I make Hashem's will mine, Hashem will make his will my will. I hope it's not a tongue twister, but it basically means that what I want, that's what Hashem is going to want for me. And it means that if someone else wants to maybe harm me or hurt me or do something which would take away from me, Hashem would take my will, give that priority over the other person's will. Yes.
Fulfilling Hashem's will as if it were your own, is that like, or is nullifying your will, is that a deeper level of that first level? Because like you could fulfill his will, or is it the same thing? Because as if it were your own, wouldn't you have to nullify your own will to fulfill his will, to make it your own?
Right, the difference between the two, really, it's pretty much the same, but the difference is One is talking about doing positive things, doing a mitzvah. So for example, it comes time to study Torah. And a man has an obligation every day to study Torah. The day is almost over. I haven't studied Torah today, but I have other things to do. So I put aside my will for Hashem's will. The second part is talking about refraining. I'm tempted to do something which is inappropriate according to Torah. It goes against Hashem's will, but I'm very tempted to do it. So I'm putting aside my will for Hashem's will. So both are really the same, except one is regarding positive commandments, doing, and one is regarding negative commands, refraining from doing something negative. So, in reference to this, I'm going to explain something here let's turn to the pages, and let's turn to page 3. There's a question on what I just read, and the question is, if you read the words, on the surface, they seem to be saying, follow and observe the commandments of the Torah. That's a very beautiful thing, but that's not what the ethics of our fathers are all about. The ethics of our fathers is to teach us something additional to the basic thing that you have to follow the Torah. So what does it mean? And do Hashem's will, so he'll do your will. I mean, you have to do Hashem's will because he's the commander and you have to follow what he says. So we started explaining this last week, and I'll explain it again and elaborate a little bit more. What we said is like this, that on top of the page, of page 3, if you see the word that says, Lefnim Meshuras Adin, which means to go beyond the letter of the law. And that's what the Mishnah is talking about. That there's 2 ways of observing mitzvahs, observing commandments. One is, I take a look at the Code of Jewish Law, and I see what I'm obligated to do. And whatever I'm obligated to do, I'm a disciplined person, I do. Do I have to go beyond that and do extra? To give an example, in the halacha, how much money is a person obligated to give for tzedakah?
10%.
10%. So if I earn $100 a week, I'm obligated to give $10 a week. What if I want to give more?
You can. Yeah.
You can, and there's a limit. It says you shouldn't give more than 20%, because then you'll be undermining your own sustenance. But the difference is to give 10%, that's halacha. To give 20%, that's going beyond the letter of the law. I'm not obligated, but I choose to do more than what I'm obligated to do. Now, this is, yes?
How does it work exactly? Are you saying specifically from like income? You're supposed to set it aside at 10, right? And you give
I'll tell you the truth, I don't want to go into that because that's a subject of halacha, of tzedakah. I'm just using that as an example. And if we do that, we're going to get lost in we'll go over the highway.
But you're allowed to give separate from that, right?
Yes.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
So not 10%, but 20, but this means that 10% and 20%, or only not 20%?
No, altogether 20%. Yeah. So, in fact, this is one of the term that's used for someone who goes beyond the letter of the law. In Gemara, it's called a chassid. This is in times of Gemara. It has nothing to do with chassidim the way we know it today. But this is one of the reasons why chassidim were named chassidim. Because a lot of the things that chassidim do are going beyond the letter of the law. Just to give an example, men are supposed to put on tefillin. It's a mitzvah. Those who do beyond the letter of the law put on 2 pairs of tefillin. Why? We'll leave that for later time. We have a class, we'll go into that as well. But I'm just showing you it's going beyond the letter of the law. You buy a mezuzah for your house. You can buy a mezuzah that costs $50, $60, and it's kosher. And then there are mezuzahs that are more beautiful, they're written more beautifully, and you could spend more money to do that. Anything a person does that's beyond the requirement of halacha is called Lefnim Meshuras Adin. That's the Torah terminology for this. What's the point behind it? In other words, one would ask, why do you have to sort of make life difficult for yourself? It's enough just to keep halacha. That's enough of a challenge to keep and do everything that you're required to do. Why do I have to make my life more difficult and take on things that are beyond the realm, beyond the requirement of halacha? So the answer is, it's not that a person who does that is just looking to make life more difficult or other kinds of reasons. Maybe they're OCD and therefore they want to do more and more and more just in case I didn't do it right. The difference is how I observe the mitzvahs. One way of observing the mitzvah is Hashem is the commander, he's boss, he's in charge, and he told me to do something, so I listen. The other way, which is, of course, the right way, the deeper way is, like we said this morning, and comes up very often, that the Torah and the mitzvahs are supposed to be observed out of love for Hashem. And to realize that when I study Torah and I observe mitzvahs, this is my way of embracing Hashem because I'm doing his will. I'm doing what he wants. So the difference between doing something which is according to halacha and not wanting to go beyond, or wanting to go beyond halacha, is whether I do the Torah mitzvahs as an obligation or I do it out of love. Like we gave the example in a relationship. There are three scenarios. One scenario where husband and wife are somehow not really respecting each other's wishes. So the wife says to the husband, I'd like you to do this, or I'd like you not to do that. He has his own opinion and he's not going to follow. It's your opinion. I want to do it my way. That's not a good situation. Then there's another situation where each person respects the spouse and if they ask for something or they say something, they're going to do it. What if they don't ask? They don't say, I'd like you to do this. But I know that that's what they would really like. Would I do it or not?
Yeah. Yes.
So it depends. If the relationship is not such a hot relationship, it's more of a like, okay, I'm doing what I'm obligated to do. I say to myself, well, she didn't ask me, she didn't say anything, I don't have to do it. If you really love someone, not only you're ready to do it, those are the things that express the love more than the things that are you're asked for. Because when someone tells you to do it and you listen, okay, that's sort of expected. When they go out of my way, person goes out of his way and buys a gift, does something that wasn't, the other party didn't say anything, and you go out of your way to do it, that expresses the love more than anything else. So if you look at the words in the Mishnah again, that's what it says, make your will Hashem's will, which means it's not telling us to observe the commandments. That's obvious. It means to say not only that you're observing it, but your will is his will. You want to do it because you have love for Hashem, and therefore you want to do that which makes him happy and that which is his will. And then it says, this and this will be the reward. But that's the emphasis in the Mishnah. On the sheet, you see that what I just told you now is number 2, the Fnim Mishur Sadin. Then there's number 3, where it says, I can't violate the mouth of Hashem. So for some of you, this is a repeat, because I said it last week, but let me just say it again. And that is that there's a story in the Chumash with Bilam, who was a prophet, and he was hired by a king whose name was Balak, that he should curse the Jews. And he was a sorcerer, so he had the power to curse. But when he opened his mouth to curse, instead of a curse coming out, a blessing came out. So he said, okay, let me try from a different spot. He went to a different spot, opened his mouth, instead of a curse, again, a blessing came out. He did it 4 times. When he came back to this king, the king was furious. I said, I hired you for a purpose. I committed myself to give you a lot of money. And the purpose was to curse the Jews. Not only you didn't do what I asked you to do, instead of cursing them, you blessed them. So what did he say? These were his words. I'm sorry, I can't violate the mouth of Hashem. If Hashem commands me to give a blessing, I have no choice. I have to follow. Sounds like beautiful words. But the way there are commentaries who say, it is beautiful words, but note, he doesn't say, I can't violate the will of Hashem. He said, I won't violate the words of Hashem, the mouth of Hashem. He knew Hashem's will because when he opened his mouth to curse the first time, it turned into a blessing. So obviously Hashem doesn't want him to be cursed. He tried it a second time. Again, it became a blessing. So it's even more obvious Hashem doesn't want him to. Why you keep trying? Because the answer is, as long as Hashem didn't tell me to stop, I'll keep trying. Even though he knew that it's not the will of Hashem. He was a wicked person, and that's why he acted that way. He was a sorcerer, he was a prophet, but he knew that has to submit himself to God. He can't go beyond that. But that's what it means to do the will of Hashem, not just the words of Hashem. Number 4 is what I mentioned, that the term for this in Gemara of someone who does good things but goes beyond the requirement of halacha is called a chassid. Number 5. What is number 5? Number 5 is an interesting statement, which means the Hebrew, Loi am haaretz chassid. An ignoramus can't be a chassid. What does that mean? An ignoramus means somebody who is not knowledgeable of Torah. Why can't it be a chassid? A chassid means go beyond the letter of the law. You have to know what the law is before you go beyond the letter of the law. So this would be compared to an argument that you hear many times. We have once a year where we have a weekend where parents and relatives come for a Shabbos to see what their family members into. Baruch Hashem has good results, but we hear a lot of questions of what's on their mind and what they're thinking and what they feel. And that's the whole purpose of the weekend, try to answer these questions. You should get a first-hand quiz. One of the questions are usually like, why does my daughter have to be such a fanatic? And they explain what they mean. Like when we'd like to go out to a restaurant to eat, she'll only eat in a kosher restaurant. I can understand keep it kosher in the house, but even when you go out, it also has to be kosher. I understand you pray when you go to the synagogue once a week on Shabbat. And some people will say you go for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but every day, that's being a fanatic. So the question is, how do you measure? What's your point of reference? What's too much? What's halacha? And what's going beyond halacha, but too much beyond to the point that it's wrong. Like we said before, if a person gives 20% to tzedakah, that's fine. But if you give more than 20%, you give away 3/4 of the money that you have, now your own family is starving, it's wrong. So how do we know what's too much, what's not too much? The answer is you have to know halacha. You have to know what the Torah says. Before you can decide that this is too much and this is not enough or this is more than enough. So a person who says that, eating in a restaurant which isn't kosher shouldn't be a problem, they don't need to say something which is rebellious. They simply don't have the knowledge to understand what that is. Or let's say sometimes parents want to satisfy their children. They say, we now are going to buy only kosher meat. And they're very disappointed because the daughter says, but you cook the meat and the dairy and use the same pots. So what? What's the big deal? Now you're being too fanatic. You get kosher meat and buying it in a kosher store. I have to go out of my way. I drive 20 minutes extra somewhere to get it. And now it's still not good enough for you. Then you get two separate pots and pans. And so what kind of sponge do you use to clean it? Use the same one for both? Come on, you're being ridiculous already. So all these things are only because of lack of knowledge of halacha. So in order to know what's too much, what's not too much, you have to know halacha. And it can go both ways. Something which is really halacha is not too much, and you're not doing it because you think it's too much. And something which is more than you should in the wrong place is also wrong because you don't know halacha. So for example, number 6. Number 6, the Gemara says there's a person that's called a chassid shaitan. Remember, a chassid goes beyond the letter of the law, but there's a person who's a foolish chassid. He's a chassid and a fool at the same time. The Gemara gives the example, a man is walking by a river and there's a woman drowning. And he says, I can't jump into the water to save her because she's not dressed. She's not sneezed. I can't jump into the water to save her. A woman has, God forbid, an attack of sorts and it's Shabbos. I can't call the doctor because it's Shabbos. That's not going beyond the letter of the law. That's actually going against the law. That person would be guilty almost of murder because you could have saved her life and you didn't. So where does the mistake come from? Lack of knowledge. So that's why the Gemara says, You can't be a chassid and at the same time not have knowledge of Torah, unless someone else is guiding you. But you can't make your own decision if you don't have the knowledge of Torah. Okay. So now we'll go to another part of this Mishnah. You know, we can really do a new Mishnah. Let's do Mishnah 10. Turn to the beginning of the booklet. Mishnah 9. 9 and 10 go together. Okay, if we're going to 9 and 10, might as well go to 8. Let's start with 8.
We're starting with 8?
So far, yeah. Not 7, just 8. Now, because I want to show you something else. Here where you see how the tradition, one of the Mishnahs that show, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai. So this is one of the Mishnahs that show us in each generation who were the ones that they were the authorities of Torah. Which means Moshe Rabbeinu was the first one. He received the Torah from God himself. Then he gave it over to Yeshua, and he was the Torah teacher of that generation. And Yeshua to another sage. And in fact, it says in the Gemara and the Talmud, it's brought down in Maimonides, that from Moshe until the Talmud was completed, there were 40 generations, which means 40 sages, which each one in their generation was the main primary teacher of Torah. They were the greatest authorities of Torah. And they were the ones who received it from the generation before. One of the names that are very famous when you study Gemara is Hillel and Shammai. By the way, in that generation, there were 2 people which were on top, Hillel and Shammai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, this sage, he was a recipient from them. He lived in the times of the Second Temple. In fact, he lived through the time where the Second Temple was destroyed. And there's a lot of stories about him, how involved he was. One of the things that stand out about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the destruction of the Second Temple is something which, only thing we can compare it to is something similar to the Holocaust. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed, maybe millions, we don't know the exact numbers. And families were destroyed. And of course, yeshivas, everything was destroyed. And it says in the Gemara, if not for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who knows if the Torah would have been able to be restored again. He opened a big yeshiva. He began to educate people in Torah, naturally lift their spirits after everything they went through. And he sort of brought back, refreshed a new inspiration, excitement about Torah study. And he had many thousands of students. So he's the one who received it from Hillel and Shammai. And he used to say, if you have learned much Torah, do not take credit for yourself. In other words, don't let Torah study make you feel arrogant, because it is for that very reason you were created. In the sense, a person could feel very proud or arrogant if they do something out of the ordinary. But he says, no matter how much Torah you studied, that was your purpose. That's why Hashem created you. And all you're doing is fulfilling your obligation. Now we had 5 students. That's the next Mishnah. Chamisha Talmidim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 disciples, and this is their names: Rabbi Eliezer ben Harkanis, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Rabbi Yossi a Kohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Aruch. These 5 rabbis. We just finished saying he had tens of thousands of students, and now we're saying he had 5 students. So the answer is, he had tens of thousands of students, but these were his 5 greatest students, and sort of through them, his teachings were spread to all the other students. He used to spell out each one's praise. In other words, each one, they were all great, they were all giants of Torah, but each one excelled in a different area. And he would point out what each one's exceptional sort of talent is, what each one's exceptional gift is. The first one was Rabbi Eliezer ben Harkanis. He referred to him as a spur sud she'enim ma'abed tipa, which means He was like a cemented cistern that doesn't lose a drop. Years ago, where would they store wine? Where would they store oil? And also water? They would store it in a hole in the ground. But of course, they had to cement the hole, otherwise everything would leak out. So they made a cemented hole. In there, they put the wine, and that's where they stored it. Or in there, they put oil, and that's where they stored it. But it was very important that you cement it in a perfect way, because otherwise, slowly, the wine would leak out, or the oil would leak out. So he needed to be held. What he meant to say was, he is so brilliant, and his brain and his memory is so amazing, that whatever he studies, not one word ever sort of escapes his memory. Everything is retained in his memory, and he knows it as if he learned it yesterday. That's an amazing quality. The second one, Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, Asher Yiladate. Happy is the one who gave birth to him. All the commentators say, how does that fit in? We're talking about gifts and talents. Let me finish the others, then I'll go back to this if we have the moment. Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, he said he's a chassid. He's what we just described. He's a person that's so righteous. Not only does he observe the Torah mitzvahs and very meticulous about doing everything, but he's someone who goes beyond the letter of the law when it comes to serving Hashem. Reb Shimon ben Nisano, his exceptional thing was Yirei Chet. He's someone who's exceptional in fear of God, which means the same thing, that he goes beyond the letter of the law, but in refraining from doing something that you're not supposed to. And the fifth one, Reb Eliezer ben Arach, Kemayon HaMizgaber. He's like an ever-increasing wellspring that the water keeps coming out, which means his knowledge of Torah is just, his brain is flooded and constantly very creative with ideas and understanding and in-depth about knowledge of Torah. And then he would say as follows, this teacher would say, if all the sages were on one side of a scale, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkin is the first one, was on the other side of the scale, he would outweigh all of them. In other words, his gift that he had was so amazing, so unusual, that if all the Torah scholars would be on one side of the scale, and he would be on the other side of the scale, his greatness would outweigh them. No, whenever you have one opinion, you have another opinion. Abba Shaul says, no, if all the sages of Israel, including Eliezer ben Horkin, were on one side of the scale, and the last one, his name was Eliezer ben Arach, he was on the other scale, he would outweigh them all. The difference between the first one and the last one, the first one was phenomenal in retaining information. Whatever he heard once in Torah, he remembered it forever. The other person, his greatest quality was his ability to be creative in understanding, in logic and intellect, and therefore constantly seeing more and more depth in what he was studying. So that was the difference of opinion. It's almost like, what's greater, quantity or quality? This person had the advantage of quantity, that he had the whole Torah, all the vast knowledge was in his head, so clear as if he learned it just this morning because he retained all the information. The other person was not so exceptional in that area, but he was exceptional in a different area, in being more creative and deep with his understanding. And now these same five are going to say something about character traits. And each one is going to say something that sort of resonates with their personality and with their great quality. So that'll be the next mission we'll do, which will be in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow. Yes.